Hi, I'm Dr. Larry Malerba, and welcome back to the ATH Materia Medica series. Today I'll be talking about the homeopathic remedy Chamomilla. Matricaria chamomilla, also known as German chamomile, is a daisy-like flower from the Asteraceae family. Chamomilla is known primarily as a remedy for the frayed nerves of extremely irritable infants and children. The scope of its activity is somewhat narrower than other remedies that we've already discussed. Although chamomilla can definitely fit adult ailments too, it's mostly a remedy for acute childhood conditions. Okay, with that said, let's get started.
All right, so this is a remedy that is most often identified by its mental state. It's a remedy for intense irritability and sensitivity. The chamomilla child is tremendously irritable. His nerves are on edge, and he's highly reactive. In most cases, this irritability is associated with physical pain. The chamomilla state of mind has been described as a combination of irritability, anger, sensitivity, and pain. The words irritable and angry, however, don't quite do justice to this mental state. Chamomilla is beyond irritable. I think frantic is a better word. He's beside himself. He's absolutely frantic with pain, and there's nothing that can be done to calm him. He is inconsolable because his suffering is intolerable. He is peevish, cross, hostile, and quarrelsome. This is not a remedy that we give to children with calm temperaments. And it's not just a simple state of anger. It's more like the entire nervous system is irritable and on edge, and this results in a frenzied and impatient state of whining, complaining, and vehement temper. The child kicks, hits, screams, and flails about. In a desperate attempt to find relief, he demands to be given something. It's as if he thinks that a bottle or a toy or a food item will soothe his agitated state. But just as soon as he's given the thing that he wants, he just as quickly tosses it aside. He then demands another thing, or even the same thing again, but impatiently and petulantly throws it away yet again. It quickly becomes clear that nothing can calm this poor, miserable child. Different repertories list this phenomena in different ways. One lists it under throws away everything given to it. Another says impatiently desires many things. Child dislikes its favorite playthings. And another rubric says desires things but refuses them when offered, throws them away. Of course, all of this is just another way of saying that chamomilla is notoriously capricious. Chamomilla's only rival listed in the repertory under capricious children is Sina. Let's take a closer look at the meaning of this word. Dictionaries define capricious as being impulsive, unstable, and unpredictable, given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. Now, the chamomilla capriciousness is largely involuntary. His obstinacy and ugly temper are a function of his great sensitivity to pain and suffering. It's not so much that he's thought about something and then decided that he's mad about it. It's more like a wildly reflexive state of mental irritability and nervous system reactivity. Now, another term that the old books use for chamomilla is vexation. Chamomilla is easily vexed. In other words, he's easily irritated. Many seemingly innocuous things grate on his nerves. He's vexed by trifles. He easily becomes angry at some annoying irritation. And as we'll see, this phenomenon works both ways. Think of it as a type of negative feedback loop. Just as his pain creates a tremendously irritable state of mind, so too his anger and vexation can exacerbate his pain. In his Synoptic Reference 1, Franz Vermeulen adds an interesting layer of understanding regarding chamomilla. He notes that chamomilla, along with senna and absinthium, are all plants belonging to the Anthemidae, which is a subdivision of the much larger Asteraceae family. About this subgroup, he notes that, quote, there's a tendency to anarchism, revolt, and major upsets in the Anthemidae. Any order is perceived as domination and ripe for overthrow. Contrary, conflicting, and antagonistic, there is resentment and antagonism to authority. Though highly intolerant of any authority, Anthemidae are authoritarian in their intolerance, brooking no contradiction to their anarchist standards. The passage concludes by saying, in other words, he, meaning Chamomilla, is looking for a fight. So by extension, we can think of Chamomilla as an ornery, unhappy anarchist who is unimpressed by authority. And since others can't do anything right, he won't hesitate to start an argument or a fight. Just as Chamomilla is extremely sensitive to pain, so too he's sensitive to all sorts of other things. He's sensitive to odors and sensitive to noise or sounds. He may be sensitive to being touched, talked to, or even looked at. This heightened sensitivity of the nerves makes all of these things nearly unbearable. His suffering makes him frantic and restless, and this restlessness leads us to the keynote Chamomilla desire to be carried. All the books emphasize the fact that Chamomilla desires to be carried. He demands to be picked up, and he wants to be carried about the room quickly. Bear in mind that this is nothing like the weepy pulsatilla type who is soothed by being gently carried by her mother. A soft touch will not work with Chamomilla. The intensity of his irritability must be matched by an intervention of equal intensity. If the parent is lucky enough, vigorously bouncing the Chamomilla child up and down while being carried will sometimes bring temporary relief. Oftentimes the child doesn't know what he wants. Just like he wants the toy and then throws it away, he wants to be picked up and then he wants to be put down again. And then he wants to be picked up again, and so on. Chamomilla lists in the repertory under desires to be carried, desires to be carried fast, desires to be carried constantly, desires to be carried without relief, desires to be carried with aversion to being touched. Imagine that. And lastly, aversion to being carried. Sometimes the Chamomilla child acts like he wants to be picked up, but then stiffens out and arches his back in anger when he is picked up. Needless to say, handling such children can be an exhausting ordeal for their poor parents. All right, now let's move on to the generals and modalities. Okay, so generally speaking, Chamomilla is warm-blooded. We often see hot feet with burning soles and a tendency to uncover the feet in bed at night. A famous Chamomilla keynote clue is that one cheek is red and hot while the other is cold and pale. We see this especially during fevers and acutes. Another interesting general is that Chamomilla tends to perspire on covered parts of the body. You may recall that Thuya has the opposite keynote symptom, which is a tendency to perspire on uncovered parts. Chamomilla can also perspire on the head, especially during fever, and there can be perspiration on the face while eating or drinking. Food and drink-wise, Chamomilla has a thirst for cold drinks and can be averse to warm drinks, especially coffee. In addition, there can be a desire for sour foods and sour drinks. One last general is that symptoms tend to occur in paroxysms, which means that symptoms occur in sudden, repeated attacks or fits. Now, in terms of modalities, the three main aggravating factors for Chamomilla are anger, coffee, and teething. We've already seen how Chamomilla is famous for its angry irritability. Well, that same emotional state can also trigger or aggravate Chamomilla's physical symptoms. I looked in the repertory for Chamomilla conditions that are aggravated by anger. I found the following: vertigo, headache, face pain, toothache, throat spasms, indigestion, nausea, cramping, vomiting, hepatitis, colic, diarrhea, bladder paralysis, heavy menstrual bleeding, suppressed menses, uterine cramping, miscarriage, suppressed lactation, asthma, cough, suffocative attacks, palpitation, insomnia, trembling, fever, and convulsions. Needless to say, anger plays a very big role in Chamomilla's pathology. Another big aggravating factor for Chamomilla is coffee. The repertory lists the following Chamomilla conditions that can be triggered by or aggravated from coffee: anxiety, irritability, vertigo, headache, toothache, stomachache, indigestion, nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramping, diarrhea, cough, difficult breathing, palpitations, insomnia, and fever. Now, you may think to yourself, infants and children don't usually drink coffee. At least I hope they don't. And while that may be true, a lot of worn-out moms do drink coffee, and as a result may be unwittingly contributing to the agitation of their nursing children. The third big Chamomilla aggravating factor is teething. Note that most of the homeopathic literature uses the term dentition to refer to the teething phase in children. Conditions associated with the Chamomilla dentition phase include irritability, headache, face pain, earache, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal colic, cough, insomnia, fever, and convulsions. In other words, for Chamomilla children, teething can be more than just some routine milestone event. All right, now additional Chamomilla modalities include the following time aggravations: worse during the evening or worse at night, and an aggravation while lying in bed at night. More specifically, sometimes we see an aggravation of symptoms at either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Substances other than coffee that can aggravate Chamomilla include alcohol and narcotic drugs. Another prominent aggravating factor is wind. In fact, Chamomilla lists strongly under aversion to wind, sensitive to wind, intolerance to wind, aggravation from wind, and even fear of wind. On the flip side, factors that can soothe Chamomilla conditions include the well-documented amelioration from being carried fast and an amelioration from warm, wet weather. And lastly, sometimes cold applications can ameliorate, and sometimes warm applications ameliorate. All right, now armed with our knowledge of Chamomilla's mental state, its generals, and its modalities, let's talk about the types of physical problems that require treatment with Chamomilla. Chamomilla has a famous reputation for being a remedy for teething children. However, it's only indicated when we see extreme restlessness and agitation, and the teething is often accompanied by fever and or diarrhea. The Chamomilla fever is also accompanied by restlessness and great irritability. and we often see the keynote one red cheek and one pale cheek, along with a thirst for cold drinks. Now, chamomilla can also be a remedy for toothaches in general. As would be expected, the pain is worse from coffee and worse from anger. It's also better from a cold drink and worse from any kind of warmth. The chamomilla ear infection causes intolerable pain and an inconsolable state of mind. It's worse from touch and worse from wind or a draft of air. The only hope of calming the child is by carrying him about quickly and vigorously. Now, chamomile also has a strong relationship to the digestive system. As noted earlier, teething or even a fever may be accompanied by diarrhea, and we naturally think of chamomilla when diarrhea occurs after anger. The diarrhea has a characteristic chopped spinach or cut grass appearance. The stool is hot, slimy, and green, and can smell like rotten eggs. Furthermore, all chamomilla discharges can have a similar rotten egg smell. This odor can be associated with stools, belching, flatulence, or even perspiration. By the way, only us homeopaths care about lovely details like this. Now, chamomilla is also a remedy for colic in infants or abdominal pains in children or adults. The pains are worse from anger, worse from coffee, worse from touch, and can be accompanied by flatulence or a distended abdomen. The pains may extend from the abdomen down to the thighs. Of course, we always look for the keynote irritability, and the infant's colic may cause it to arch its back as it cries in pain and anger. Chamomilla can also be indicated for women's health problems. We think of it when there are labor pains with great irritability and anger. And as with abdominal colic and cramps, it can fit cases of dysmenorrhea when the menstrual pains extend down to the thighs. Another clue is that chamomilla pains can be associated with a sensation of numbness. There can be numbness with labor pains, dysmenorrhea, toothache pain, facial neuralgias, or sciatica. We always think of chamomilla when female health problems are triggered by anger. It fits anger followed by uterine cramping with labor-like pains, and uterine hemorrhages with profuse, dark, clotted blood. It even fits threatened miscarriage caused by anger and irritability. Okay, now chamomilla also fits problems having to do with the respiratory tract. It fits coughs, croup, bronchitis, and even asthma. The chamomilla cough is a dry, tickling cough that is worse at 9 p.m. or worse from 9 p.m. until midnight. We think of this remedy when a cough occurs at night in bed during sleep without waking the person. The chamomilla asthma may be triggered by or made worse from anger. Chamomilla children can have difficulty breathing or suffocative attacks associated with fits of anger. Some hold their breath during fits of anger and then wind up having trouble breathing. And lastly, chamomilla can be a remedy for spasms and convulsions, especially when they're associated with anger. It also fits seizures that occur during dentition. It even fits convulsions in nursing infants that are triggered by anger on the part of the mother. All right, now let's finish up with remedy relationships. Okay, so remedies that are considered to be complementary to chamomilla include calc carb, belladonna, mag carb, and pulsatilla. Remedies that we want to compare to chamomilla include antimonium crude, which is very irritable, can't stand to be looked at or touched, is warm-blooded and tends to have digestive troubles. Sina, likewise, is extremely irritable and difficult, capricious, averse to touch, and desires to be carried. Calc-Phos is irritable, capricious, whiny, and complaining, perspires on the head, and can be a teething remedy. Hepar-Sulf can be very irritable, nasty, and oversensitive, and is indicated for a lot of acutes, like ear infections, fevers, and coughs. Ignatia can be intensely emotional, capricious, and can have fitful cramps and spasms. And finally, both Colocynthis and Staphysagria have a lot of ailments that are triggered by and aggravated from anger. Okay, there you have it. That's Chamomilla in a nutshell. I hope you're finding these acute remedy episodes to be helpful. Please like and share this video, and I always appreciate your comments. And I hope you'll tune in again for the next All Things Homeopathy episode. May the vital force be with you and your loved ones.